Hey guys, it's Nathan. So it's been a minute since I've done a video that showcased like me actually doing any tests, and that's because I haven't done any for a little while. But I'm getting back into the swing of things, and so as I am moving to tackle that stuff again, I was thinking of a couple of ways that like I need to go about doing things, and like, oh, I haven't really made a video about that. So I thought this one would be really helpful. I've talked a whole bunch about how I think the best way to prep for a Clep test or a DSST test is to actually take one of the practice exams. And so I have my Clep book, my practice test book with me. This one is actually the 2016 version, but good enough. And I also have my notebook and a pen, which is everything that I need in order to take a Clep practice test. In my office, which is awesome. And I'm just going to walk you guys through what I do in order to take one of these tests and to make sure that I'm totally prepared to go take this and pass it. So far, this method has not failed me. So that's pretty good, at least for my part. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write down a whole bunch of things, and I'm going to try to do a little editing in this video. We'll see how that goes. It's honestly not something I do, and I kind of suck at that. So, we'll see. But I'll pretty much just walk you through my process. So, hang out with me. This one is going to be American history, which I actually need for my degree program. So, hope this is helpful. Thanks. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually find the test that I need. I looked in the table of contents here. Wow, I totally forgot what that was for a second. And the one I need is History of the United States 1. That's on page 245. So here I am. Now, it talks about a few of the things that are supposed to be in the test. Now remember, this is a 2016 book, so not only is it just a smidge outdated, but actually, I don't find most of this information to be very useful. Some of these bullet points are useful, but for the most part, for me, I need to know what I'm missing. And so I actually just go through the exam. This particular exam, we can see how many questions it has by jumping to the end here. 96 answer key. So the answer key has 96 answers on it. Now, we don't pay attention to the answer key. We just jump back to the beginning of the exam. I also don't write in the book because I like to be able to come back to the book if I do really poorly and try to take the exam again. Personally, I don't remember what I wrote down as answers like 4 or 5 days later, especially after I've been studying other things. So if I just write things in my notebook instead of writing them in the actual book itself, then I keep the book fairly pristine, and that way I just can make marks in my notebook, and I can use the test from this book again to test myself again, because I won't remember the answer key. You can see here I've made 5 rows of 5 columns of numbers that go all the way to 96, and that's because I'm going to start taking this test from question 1, and I'm going to fill in my answers in my notebook here. Then when I get done, I'm going to score myself. Okay, so I've finished writing down all of my answers in my notebook, and now I'm going to go through and I'm going to score my answers. I'm going to score them by using a red pen in here, and then I'm just going to mark the ones that I get wrong. I don't need to mark the ones that I get right, just the ones that I get wrong. And again, I'm not going to be making marks on this paper. I'm just going to be reading. Oh, hey, look, I got the first one right. And then marking the ones I got wrong, and then I'll count them up and divide them. Okay, so I finished scoring my test, and I technically passed, but not in a way that I'm satisfied with. So when I do a practice test, I like to score 65 as the absolute minimum. If I score 70 or above, I'm good. I'm gold. I'll schedule the test for this week. I'll go take it, and we're done. Scoring below a 70 always leaves me in a little bit of a lurch, but 65% is sort of like my cutoff point. I scored a 55% on this particular test, and that means I'm going to read a book. So most of my scores were sort of bunched. The red is sort of all bunched right in here, which means I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, okay, let me read some of these questions again that I got wrong and see what the subject matter is. And so let me walk through a couple of those. So I know that I got literally 72 through 76 I got all wrong, which means there's probably a particular subject matter in there that I really just don't know very much about. And there were 2 of those where I got 6 in a row wrong. So it's probably talking about something specific that I don't understand. Now, there were a bunch of other places where I got maybe like 1 in 3 wrong, and then another 2 that I got right, and then another 1 that I got wrong, and so inevitably you're just not going to have little bits of information. And how important is that? Well, in aggregate, it could be important, but what I want to target is those strings of 6 in a row where I got them all wrong. Probably there's one set of subject matter in there where now I can say, if I can learn a little bit about this and a little bit about those 2 concepts, and then I'm probably going to cover a big swath of the types of questions. That's going to move me from like that 55% range up to maybe like a 60-65% range where I would feel comfortable going to take the test. Now, luckily about American history is that it doesn't really change. That some sort of depends on who's telling it. It might depend a little bit on what perspective that you get or what a person wants to hear regarding what is a right answer to the question. But for the most part, it's history, and so the test isn't going to change all that much. And they might ask about different things that happened, but the stuff that happened is basically the same. So we have at least that going for us, or me. So I'm going to look at, I'm actually going to look at 42 through 46 I got wrong. So let's jump back to those questions. And it looks like they're talking about the Compromise of 1850. Then first half of the 19th century, which would have been the 1800s, I think. Then this is talking about 1800 to 1860, and then a question about the Civil War. So I'm pretty much going to focus my area around this Compromise of 1850, some of the events leading up to it, and American agriculture. It looks like the economic shifts and the Compromise of 1850 are things that would be really beneficial for me to know more about. Then it looks like I got 72 through 77. I missed all of those questions. So let's jump ahead and look at what the subject matter in that was. So 72, Northwest Ordinances, Proclamation of 1763. Then this is a question about the Supreme Court. This is a question about the Supreme Court. This is a question about the election. Okay, so judicial things. Basically, I'm going to want to double check the primary circumstances of things that set the Supreme Court rulings or effects of major Supreme Court rulings in the late 1800s. So again, that's sort of like a broad swath, but it seems like it's going to tackle a decent set of information that I'm expected to know about, that people who are writing the test feel like is very relevant for these tests. Again, you don't want to specifically target learning about that particular question because they're not going to ask that particular question again, or most likely. What's going to happen is they're still going to ask questions in that type of information. So when I look at this and it says the Supreme Court did this and this with this particular ruling, it's possible that they're going to ask about that particular ruling again, but it's very likely that they're going to talk about Supreme Court rulings or major moments in the judicial system in the late 1800s, things that were nation-shaping. and focusing on economics and slavery and women's suffrage seem to be a massively significant point, right? I mean that makes sense anyway. And so picking that period of, it looks like if I study right around pretty much the mid 1800s to late 1800s, is going to cover a huge swath of the type of history that I'm looking at. And specifically in those three areas, the abolition of slavery, judicial decisions right in that time period that were massively economically shaping or had to do with slavery or women's suffrage, or the major players in sort of those three things. And that's it. That's what I'm going to learn about. That means I'm probably going to read one book, and I'm going to get it on an audiobook, and I'm going to listen to it over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'm going to try this again, and we'll see what happens.